There's another one, the swords at Jesus' arrest. And according to Mark 14:47, and it's followed by Matthew and Luke, somebody had a sword at Jesus' arrest in the garden, and somebody used it. According to the different traditions, it was Peter, according to John, and somebody the others don't name, somebody whacked off the ear of the high priest's slave. But there's these different stories about Jesus, somebody in Jesus' entourage was armed, and in some of the sources, one of the sources, there are two of them on there are two swords, others is one sword. Now, I think this is historical. Why? Because all the gospel writers want to go out of their way to say Jesus was not mounting a violent revolution. He was not a criminal. This was not an armed rebellion. He's completely innocent of any political charge of insurrection. But if Jesus' disciples were armed with swords at his arrest in the middle of the night at the Passover in Jerusalem, that's insurrection, folks. The Romans did not allow Jews just to go around in the middle of the night in gardens carrying swords. For a Jew to be armed at the Passover, an especially dangerous time that the Romans were really worried about, for a Jew to be armed following around a guy who some people were saying was the king of the Jews, you can be arrested for that. You can be crucified for that. So I don't think early Christians invented it. I think some of these early Christians knew that at least one and possibly more of Jesus' disciples were armed at his arrest. So that's another, why do I see that? Because it's not something they would have invented. In fact, it goes against their tendency.
Swords were very much around in the very beginning of the medieval period. They weren't that prominent. Swords were very much symbols of status and prestige, and only the more wealthy types of warriors would be able to afford getting one of these weapons. You see, swords required more steel than the common types of weapons, which were more axes and spears, and they required far more work in the terms of the forging and manufacturing to make a sword that was serviceable for the rigors of combat.